And here we go for Chapter 6, Section 1, specifically, what is a biome? Your essential question, I want you to explain why plants describe the name of a biome. As we get into those, hopefully that'll make a little more sense. Biomes themselves. These are large regions characterized by a specific type of climate and then certain types of plant and animal communities. Each biome is made up of many different individual ecosystems. Ecosystems can be quite small, but when we're talking biome, we're talking large geographical region dictated by the particular type of climate and then the plants and animals that we find there. Now, key term, biomes and vegetation, digging right into the heart of our essential questions, if you will. Biomes are described by their vegetation because plants that grow in an area determine what other organisms can live there. Whether or not they need to eat the plants that are there, they're hiding in the plants that are there, living in the plants, habitat, etc. All of these play a part of it. So plants in any particular biome have characteristics, very specialized structures or adaptations that allow the plants to survive in that biome. These adaptations or these adaptations include size, whether they're big or small, shape, color. Okay, for example, plants in the tundra, very cold, but also things tend to be very short because they don't receive much precipitation. So they don't get much precipitation, they can't grow very large, so everything we find there tends to be very short. Just one example of size and shape, how it varies in a particular biome. The picture, this shows the world's major terrestrial biomes. At the very top, looking at the north, this is just polar ice. Now, in a sense, polar ice isn't really a biome, but it is something that we find and it sometimes gets pulled out. Different textbooks, different scientists will categorize these biomes slightly differently, but most of the major ones exist there. Now, in the middle, looking at where the equator would be, this is where we tend to find the tropical biomes. Tropical biomes include the tropical rainforest. We see those in light green. It's also going to include the savanna grasslands, specifically in the tropics. And we'll also find desert in these areas as well. Then as we move up a little bit into, if we're moving north, into the temperate region, or we can drop down south, but there's not a lot in the temperate region in the southern hemisphere, just a little bit of South America and a tiny bit into Australia. But in the temperate region, we're going to find temperate rainforest, very little of these, temperate deciduous forest, find that kind of in the dark blue. We have temperate grassland in the light blue, so up in America as well as in Europe and Asia. And then above this area, we run into the Taiga, which is mainly coniferous forest, then into the tundra. We will also see our various deserts. We find tropical deserts, but we also find temperate deserts, and we find cold weather deserts, which are almost like tundra, but certain areas. Not much moisture, we wind up getting deserts. Some people also include a mountains area. Some people break this down differently, but at least in this map, we're also looking at mountain or alpine regions. But these make up our major terrestrial biomes that we will use to talk about the rest of this chapter. Now, when it comes down to it, your key term, biomes and climate. Climate drives what biome we have. And as we should know, climate is just the average weather conditions in an area over a long period of time. It's been said, climate is what you expect, weather is what you get. Here in Florida, we kind of expect it to be hot and humid, but on any given day, especially in the wintertime, it could be cool and dry. even in other times. So climate's what you expect, weather is what you get, weather over a long period of time. Climate is the main factor that determines what plants can grow where, and in turn defines the biome. I don't have much moisture, I have a desert biome. I have a lot of rain, I have a forest biome. I have a lot of rain and it's very warm, I have a tropical rainforest. I get a lot of rain, but it's moderate, temperate, in between, I get a deciduous forest. The climate tends to dictate. And when we talk about climate, what we're really talking about are temperature and precipitation. These are the two most important factors. It might be hot and dry, it might be hot and humid. These are big factors in what a climate is, therefore what biome we find ourselves. Basically, if you tell me what the amount of rainfall or precipitation and the average temperatures, I can pretty much tell you what kind of biome you're going to find yourself in because they adhere to these climates very strictly. So when we're talking about temperature and precipitation, these aspects that define a climate, therefore define a biome. Most organisms are adapted to live in a particular range of temperatures, and they don't survive at temperatures too far above or below that range. Take something like a tree frog. Well, it needs a damp, moist environment. You take a tree frog somewhere very cold, it doesn't live long. You take it somewhere very dry, it doesn't live long. They have a pretty narrow range of temperatures. Some animals are adapted to live where it's really cold. Let's take a polar bear. You bring a polar bear down south, it doesn't do very well. Even when we have them in zoos, they have to put lots of ice in, they have to keep their enclosures cooler than the normal temperature because they're adapted for the cold weather. Also, precipitation limits the organisms that can be found in any particular biome. All organisms need water. On the planet Earth, water is key for life or survival. The larger the organism, the more water it needs. If I don't have a lot of water, I'm not going to find bigger organisms like trees or elk, if you will. I get into a desert, I might find some cactus, but I'm not going to find a huge, massive oak tree. I might find a fox, but I'm not going to find a bison or an elk. There's not enough water for these organisms. Temperature and precipitation are big, they're key. Biomes that don't get enough rainfall to support these large trees, large animals, tend to be dominated either by smaller trees or even shrubs and grasses. As we move from a forest into a grassland, it kind of goes from big trees to fewer trees, not as many smaller trees, and only grass. The water gets limited, dictating what kind of organisms can be found there. The higher the temperature and the higher the precipitation, the taller and denser the vegetation. Enough rain and enough high temperatures, we get tropical rainforests. Very dense vegetation, very large, and many different types of organisms. However, if rainfall is not very frequent, well, the vegetation is going to primarily be things like cactuses, desert shrubs, scrub kind of things. In extreme cases, lack of water results in no plants whatsoever. And it doesn't matter what the temperature. We can think the Sahara Desert where it's really hot and very dry, or you can go to the Gobi Desert up in China where it actually gets very cold, but very dry. But no precipitation at all always results in a desert. Doesn't matter if it's hot or cold, no rainfall, no plants. The picture I have coming up, I really like. This is a great one to try and determine what you have. So down at the bottom, it goes from being very wet towards being very dry on the other side. So I guess we do this kind of this right to left, going from wet to dry. And then it's going from hot to cold. So I get down in the very far corner, or this left-hand corner, where it's really hot and very wet. This is where I get tropical rainforest. The temperature goes down a little bit, but I still have a lot of moisture. I run into temperate forest. A lot of times this is going to be deciduous forest where the leaves fall off. I keep getting colder, but I have a reasonable amount of precipitation. I run into the Taiga. This is a coniferous pine forest. They don't need as much water because their growth rate can be a little quicker, and we still find them even less water. And getting colder, I move into the tundra, and cold enough, I get where it's just ice. The same thing, so if I go down at the bottom, this is my tropical region. So I'm going to have tropical rainforest, not enough water, I get grassland or a savanna, even less water, desert. The temperate, deciduous forest, grassland, desert. Subarctic, where it's very cold, we tend to just have taiga. This is going to be coniferous forest, and moving is just into smaller and smaller types of trees until we get to the tundra. So the subarctic and the Arctic are going to be some range of coniferous forest into tundra, depending on amount of rainfall. But I really like that one. It's a great way to kind of scope out which biome we find where. Then we come into latitude and attitude. Jimmy Buffett used to have a song, changes in latitude, changes in attitude. You get farther south, you get more relaxed. But alas, not what we're talking about here. Latitude are the latitudinal lines on the planet. So it starts at equator, which is 0, and the latitude lines go from 0 to 90 north and 0 to 90 south. The distance north or south from the equator. Altitude is how high up we are getting above sea level. So latitude, we're at sea level the whole time, but how far away from the equator are we? Altitude, how high up into the atmosphere are we climbing? Basically going up a mountain or in a weather balloon, something like this. Climates vary with latitude and with altitude. Typically, the farther away from the equator we get, the colder it gets, cooler and cooler temperatures. The higher up in the air we get, cooler and cooler temperatures. So obviously, if you're somewhere with a high latitude and a high altitude, it gets very cold. For example, I am on the equator, it's very hot. We move into somewhere like Virginia and it's temperate. It might be hot in the summer, might be very cold in the winter. I move up into the subarctic or the Arctic up on top of Alaska and it's cold all the time. Hot all the time, cold all the time, the region in the middle. So farther away from the equator we get, colder it gets. The higher up a mountain we get, the colder it gets. As latitude and altitude increase, going away from or up in the air, biomes and vegetation change. We get different things. Tropical rainforests, these grow close to the equator. Basically, between 0 and 30 are the tropics. Really, it's kind of like 0 to 20 are tropics, 20 to 30 is like subtropics. So here in Gainesville, Florida, we're at like 29.40. So we're really sort of subtropical. We're not true tropics. 0 to 30, the warm climates, 30 to 60, the temperate or the in-between, above 60, cold climates. We tend to get rainforests down around the equator, and we tend to get lichen and things up in the tundra. The temperate regions include biomes. The temperate, this is going to be your classic 4 seasons, summer, spring, winter, fall. It can be very hot in the summer, it can be very cold in the winter. So we get things like the temperate forest or deciduous forest. Deciduous means fall down. The leaves fall down during the winter time. We find deciduous forests, we find the temperate grasslands, and we also have temperate deserts. Like here in America, the deserts of Arizona, Nevada, etc. They're further north than we are here in Florida, so they experience cold weather, but they also have hot weather. It depends on the season. So things with moderate temperatures tend to have fertile soil, making them really good for agriculture. So that's where you find a lot of our areas are really good for agriculture. It used to be grasslands. We just basically turned them into farmlands. This last picture kind of dictates or shows us a picture of this latitude and altitude. Latitude at the bottom, so at the very far corners, that far northwest corner, we are looking at right at the equator, and then it would be going up. So if I had a huge mountain right at the equator, well, the higher up I go in that mountain, it's going to get colder and colder, and my biomes are going to change. Let's say Mount Everest happened to be right at the equator. Well, down at the base of it, it's going to be tropical rainforest, lots of rain, trees, etc. As I go up, it starts to get colder, and a lot of times the higher up we go, the clouds form and the condensation falls closer down, and I get less and less moisture up the mountain, typically. So, down at the base of this mountain, it's tropical rainforest. As I go up, I get higher. I move into a temperate forest. It's going to be deciduous. The leaves will fall off because they experience a winter. I go higher up the mountain. It gets even colder, and I probably run into just a pine forest like the Taiga. I get high enough up, very little moisture, very cold, tundra-like things, just lichen and mosses. And at the very top, it may be ice capped the entire time. As I move away from the equator towards the pole, could be North Pole or South Pole, then I have my tropical rainforests. They give way into deciduous rainforest, or not rainforest, deciduous forests, a little cooler, and that gives way into taiga, and the taiga gives way into tundra and ultimately into polar ice. So in this case, we're just looking at reasonable moisture, but a change in either elevation or a change in latitude. Changes in latitude, changes in attitude, wraps us up for today. Take care, guys, and we'll see you next time when we specifically look at the forest biome.